What is good, everybody? Welcome to the Gold Diggers podcast on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. I'm Rob Stats Guerrera. It is Friday. Michelle Magdziuk is here.
Hey. I forgot to ask, are we live?
Yeah, we're live. What
Oh,
do you mean?
yes. Okay, good. I wanted to be live. I want to have the interaction with people. We're going to be talking fantasy running back. So I need people's input because I like when people don't agree with me sometimes. It makes me think harder. And I love that kind of communication with the fans.
There you go. I love the live too. We welcome your comments all show long. Please feel free. Throw it in the chat and we will respond. I want to remind you, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And we're so close to 4,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel. Please, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it. And of course, rate, review, and follow wherever you get your audio podcasts as well. If you leave a review, we will read it. Which brings me to this one. Michelle from Poncho 1, 4 stars.
I read it. I already read it. I'm not happy.
Rob, just showing love to the pods that you got going on here, especially with Steph and Michelle. They kill it. Now for the wet towel. Every time he says Bosa's name, I don't know who he's talking about, but every time he says Bosa's name, it's like a swift kick in the nads. Why do you repeatedly or a hard Z in his name? For that, sorry, Michelle, you get a 4, 1 or 5, but everyone else makes up for him. Who is he talking about that says Boza? I don't think
11. He says Boza. That's why he says wet blanket.
Now for the wet towel. Oh, okay. I misunderstood. So,
but he does. He says Boza instead of Bosa, but that's not a reason for a 4-star. Come on.
Okay, great. That's going to cost a star.
If you like what he has to say, you got to get over that. It might just be his Pittsburgh accent. You know, we have that accent there. People say I have an accent, which I don't hear whatsoever.
I only hear it when you say one word. Talent.
Talent?
Yep. I don't know what it is, but for some reason, to me, that sounds like no one else on the planet says that word the way you do.
Oh, all right. That's my bad. Talent.
There you go. All right. On today's show, we are continuing our fantasy football preview. We are doing running backs today. I am very excited because I think you're going to get some 49ers fans mad at you with some of these rankings. And that's good because I like when they're mad at you.
I don't think they'll be too mad. I think I have a good reasoning behind all of it. They have to understand. Also, shiny new toys get us all excited. Fantasy players like the youngins. So I think we're going to see kind of a theme there with this.
All right, well, let's kick it off right now. Number 10 in 2023.
All right, so I'm going with a homer pick. His jersey's right behind me. It's Najee Harris of the Steelers. He's not fun for a lot of people to want to pick because his efficiency has been so bad throughout his career that it's, watching him isn't like super exciting. So it's not like a guy like you're dying to draft. However, I do think he will be much better for fantasy this year. Last year he was the running back 14, and it was in a year he stunk, especially for the first half of the season. But people forget he had a Liz Frank injury that happened in training camp, and he just played through it. He had like screws in his foot. It was bad. And he was still the RB14 with like completely sucking the first half of the year. So from weeks 1 through 8, he averaged just 9.4 fantasy points per game in half PPR. So I'm going to not say half PPR this whole show, but that's the scoring format I'm using for my rankings and for everything I'm talking about. Half PPR. 9.4 fantasy points per game. He had just 1 touchdown during that time, was averaging just 3.3 yards per carry. It was brutal. Oof. But then the Steelers had their week 9 bye. He got the screws out of his foot, and he came back after the bye. His carries per game went way up. His yards per carry went to 4.1. Still not great, but that's doable. Had 6 rushing touchdowns and averaged 14.2 fantasy points per game, which becomes a very solid number. That would have put him as a running back 8 in points per game last year, right behind a guy like Tony Pollard, who had a very nice season. And it all comes down to volume for fantasy. He gets so much volume, and I don't see that changing. Over the last 2 years, he leads the league with 694 touches. He leads also the league in percentage of team scrimmage touches at over 40% of the Steelers' scrimmage touches over the last 2 seasons. And I think, again, this team is going to lean on the defense with a healthy TJ Watt, going to lean on the run game. And they fixed their offensive line over the last 2 seasons. I just expect this to be a much better year for him, and I don't expect the volume to change whatsoever.
And the one positive thing I'll say about Najee Harris, he's never hurt. He hasn't been hurt in the last 5 years, even going back to Alabama. And at running back, that is a rare thing. But he's got to tick up the production.
Well, he was hurt last year, but he played through it.
Right.
Which
that's what I mean.
is a good thing and also a bad thing all in one. Maybe he should have gave his foot some rest and sat out. Like, who plays through a Liz Frank injury?
You went homer on number 10. Not off to a good start, Michelle.
I don't think it's too much of a homer, and I do think he's an amazing value. He is going 20 picks later than guys like Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb, and Saquon Barkley. I'll explain why I think he can perform just as well as those guys. But
sorry, I didn't mean to jump here. It's a little weird at running back when you've got some big names not under contract. Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, these are top players at the position, and right now we don't know what's going to happen with them, but I assume you're going to incorporate all that into your rankings.
Oh yeah all
right,
Josh Jacobs actually is even in the top 10, spoiler alert.
What?
He's just outside, so there's a few there's a lot of good running backs, all right, and it's really hard to fit them all in, and Josh Jacobs is just outside. There's a handful of guys that are just outside that top 10 that I'm like, I wish I could have fit you in, but I couldn't. So Josh Jacobs is not in it.
Oh, I hope Josh isn't listening.
I don't think he is. He hates fantasy football. So I don't think he's listening to a fantasy show. Number 9 might surprise a lot of folks. After the news broke about Dalvin Cook, I thought this would be a popular opinion. But I've been listening to fantasy podcasts, and a lot of people don't share the opinion that I have, that Alexander Madison is a top 10 running back this year. I have him at number 9, which might be a little high, but I think he's one of the best values in drafts. I do expect his cost to increase a bit as we get through closer to September, but it's still going to be a great value. So Dalvin Cook, as I mentioned, is gone from the team.
Mm-hmm.
Alexander Madison is now the clear-cut RB1 for the Vikings. He's only started 6 games in his career, and those were all when Dalvin Cook missed. He averaged 129 scrimmage yards per game over 4 starts in 2021. And in his 5 games with 20-plus touches, he averaged 146 scrimmage yards per game over that time. All this guy needs is touches, and he's absolutely amazing. Over his last 5 starts, he averaged 23 fantasy points per game. He had 5 scrimmage touchdowns during that time, over 120 scrimmage yards per game over those games. I think as soon as he steps into this role, he's going to be fantastic. There's no other player on this depth chart that's going to challenge him for touches. It's Ty Chandler, who was a 5th-round rookie last year, Dwayne McBride, who was a 7th-round pick this year, and Kenny Nwagwu, I don't even know how to say his last name, but 0 career carries because he's their kick returner. This is Alexander Madison's team. They're on a good offense. He's been nothing but efficient when he's gotten the work, and been nothing but a great fantasy player when he gets starts. So I'm excited for him this year.
Opportunity is a huge part of this. Running back, we have seen you can have a guy come out of nowhere and produce, and the Vikings clearly weren't too worried about it because they had no problem letting Dalvin Cook go. Their passing game is going to be good enough to make the running game, a viable threat where they're not just going to be able to load up the box. I have no problem with this. If you had him higher, I think I might have given you a little side eye, but number 9, I'm totally on board.
Yeah. And what's cool about him being at number 9, it's way higher than he's even being drafted, so you can get him for a value later. And also, I think his ceiling is a top 5 guy. He kind of reminds me of James Conner going into, 2018 when Le'Veon Bell held out. And it was like, okay, well, he gets his chance now, and he just balled out. And James Conner was a very good running back as long as he was healthy. So if Alexander Madison can stay healthy, I see him having a 28 type season that Conner had. He was a top 5 running back when on the field.
Okay. Didn't know that we'd get to Madison, but I like it. I like it where it is. Who do you have at number 8?
It's Nick Chubb of the Browns.
Whoa!
What?
Low.
Why is it low?
Nick Chubb is the first running back in the history of the NFL to average 1,000 yards and 5 yards a carry in 4 straight years.
That's awesome. And last year, he was a running back 6 in fantasy points per game, and that's his highest finish so far. And that was in a year with over 1,500 rushing yards and 12 rushing touchdowns. So a huge year, and he's still the RB6 in fantasy points per game, RB10 in 2021, RB7 in 2020, RB10 in 2019. He's great. He's going to be a top 10 running back like he always is. But I don't think he has the ceiling to be a top 3 guy because it's due to the lack of receiving work. He just doesn't get it. He's absolutely amazing on the ground for sure. And he's the only running back on this team worth getting any carries. Now that Kareem Hunt is gone, it's literally like Jerome Ford behind Nick Chubb and nobody else. So we'll see what kind of work he gets this year. Maybe that increases and that helps his ceiling, but he already had 302 carries last year. How many more can you give a guy without risking injury? That's a big thing there. And he sucked with Deshaun Watson. I shouldn't say Nick Chubb sucked. He was still very good on the ground. His efficiency did go down, but it was still at like 4.8. So he was still fine. It's just he wasn't scoring any touchdowns because the team wasn't scoring any touchdowns. But he averaged just 11.4 fantasy points per game over the 6 games that Deshaun Watson started last year. You have to expect Watson to be better this season, and I do. So hopefully his touchdowns will increase again with him on the field. But that's what it comes down to for Nick Chubb. How many touchdowns does he score? Because that's how he scores points. I don't expect him to get any more receptions this year because they actually added to their wide receiver group. They had nobody last year, and he still only had 37 targets. So he's just not that guy that's going to get that. I think running back 8 is fair for him. You know what you're going to get. But it's that guy who's consistently going to score 15 fantasy points for you, not really that guy that's going to put up those huge games often because he doesn't have the receiving threat.
This one has a lot of variance to me because if Deshaun Watson gets anywhere close to where he was with the Texans, I think Chubb is going to become a monster because teams are going to be loading up to stop Deshaun Watson, and he's going to be the beneficiary of that.
How much more efficient can Nick Chubb be, though? He already had 302 carries last year, had over 1,500 yards, had 12 rushing touchdowns. What more do you expect? And he was still only RB6.
All I'm saying is, if he's not right now, teams were loading up to stop Nick Chubb, and that's what he did, right? Yeah. Nobody was going into the game against the Browns with Jacoby Brissett like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Jacoby Brissett's coming. No.
Well, what's weird is he was more efficient with Jacoby Brissett than he was with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah,
he was hyper efficient with Jacoby Brissett.
Watson that was such a weird situation. I mean, all the off-field stuff, him being a complete dirtbag. And
you cannot be predicting that Nick Chubb is going to be averaging over 5.5 yards per carry, which he basically was doing with Brissett.
He averages 5 yards a carry the last 4 years, though.
I know, but 5.5, like you cannot put his average high. Like I'm not saying he can't possibly do it, but you could never do your projections and be like, this running back is going to have 300 carries and project him to have 5.5 yards per carry. That's just not reasonable.
I think that if you bet on Nick Chubb this year, I understand that. He had 3 more runs of 20 or more yards than any other running back in the league last year.
He's amazing. That's why I have him as RB8 because he's really good.
But you just happen to think there's all those guys better than him.
In fantasy, if we were ranking right now just rushers, just running backs in the league who I'd want on the Steelers, sure, Nick Chubb would be higher. But when you're talking about fantasy, especially when it comes to half PPR, or especially PPR, the receiving work just matters a little bit more.
Shout out to Ted Talks Ball giving us the pineapple emoji in reference to George Kittle's pineapple commercial. Did you see that commercial with Kittle where he was naked and the pineapples were, placed in strategic areas?
No, I did not. I'm okay
wow.
not seeing it, though. George Kittle's not the cutest human that I've ever seen.
Now he's going to be mad at both of us. He's already mad at me because I said he wasn't going to finish his contract.
He has a wonderful personality.
Oh, God. That's the kiss of death. Do you want to be set up with this person? Tell me about him.
We can tell George Kittle that, it's not like I particularly like men anyways when it comes to attractiveness,
True. The long hair is not doing him any favors. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Yeah. All right. We are at number 7 on the list.
All right, this one I don't feel great about. And if you want to take Nick Chubb over him, that's fine. I'm going Saquon Barkley with the Giants. And at his cost, Saquon Barkley won't be on any of my teams. He was a running back 5 in fantasy points per game last year in half PPR. He started off the season so incredibly hot. He led the league with 931 rushing yards from weeks 1 through 10. And then somehow the rest of the season only had 381 rushing yards. His efficiency and his usage just died. I don't really know what happened. Weeks 1 through 10, he was averaging 22 carries per game, 4.7 yards per carry, 18.4 points per game in fantasy. Then weeks 11 through 18, the whole second half of a season, that's a massive chunk. His carries per game went down to 13.9, 3.9 yards per carry. So his efficiency died as well. 12.9 fantasy points per game. And then also, like in the postseason, his efficiency went up, but he only averaged 9 carries a game in those 2 games. So for whatever reason, they went away from using Saquon Barkley in the second half of the season. I don't think that's necessarily smart because I mean, it worked out for them, right? They made the playoffs, they won a game, whatever. But the Giants even added more pass catching weapons this year. No, none of them are still known. So who knows what happens, but they added more. They're going to get back guys healthy. And it's so hard to trust Saquon Barkley because we haven't seen him put together a full season since 2018, his rookie year. Like that's the last time we've seen him put together a full good season. And this is just what he does. He's too inconsistent. And he's going to have really good games, massive games, and then he's going to disappear. And it's hard to trust him, but I'm sure at the end of the year, he'll finish around this range. So that's why I have him ranked here.
He's the George Kittle of running backs.
He really is. That's great.
He can have weeks that just destroy teams. 18 carries, 164 yards in week 1 with a touchdown. Also threw in 30 yards receiving against Tennessee. That's a massive, massive week for you. But he has so many weeks. Like week 13 last year, 9 carries, 28 yards, no touchdowns. Like there's too many of those. It's just like George Kittle. They can be great at their best, but when your lows are that low, I can't have that guy on my team.
I completely agree. And I also, as an actual NFL team, this is kind of the spicier take because I was just talking about if I was ranking Nick Chubb as actual running backs, he'd be higher. I wouldn't want Saquon Barkley on the Steelers as a running back. I don't think he's a very good running back. I think he's an exceptional weapon. I think he is like truly special in his talent that he has to break off any given play and be used as a receiver and all that. There are too many times. It takes him 15 carries of losing yards to then break off a 50-yard run. Like he ruins too many drives by getting -1 yards or 0 yards or 1 yard before he breaks off that long one. And it's like, yeah, that's great when he does it. But this has always bothered me about Saquon.
Alberto Soto watching on YouTube says, I believe Saquon was just trying to stay healthy to get that new contract. That's the thing. Chris Sims tells
their team was good and they were winning games and they're going to the playoffs, you would think. And like, you think he has a choice if he gets used or not, though? Like the way his usage went down, I don't know. But the thing is, if he would have just actually stayed healthy and balled out, then he probably would have already had his contract extension. But because he fell so far flat on his face the second half of the year, maybe the team is like, what the hell?
I don't think I've said many times, teams should never give running backs a second contract ever. Just the way the league is set up. It just doesn't make any sense. You can replace running back production for far, far, far cheaper than it will cost you to re-sign a running back. And I know that's mean. And I fully admit running backs are getting shafted. Absolutely. But these are the rules that are set up. JJ00 watching on my Twitch page at Stats on Fire. The difference with Kittle is there's other good running backs, but basically every other non-Kelsey tight end was cheeks in fantasy. Yeah, there's a lot more good running backs and good tight ends.
Really good point there. And that's especially like Saquon Barkley is going late first, early second round, where even if you don't want to reach on any of these other guys at running back, you're like, oh, Barkley or different running back, take one of the top wide receivers. And there's going to be Alexander Madison later in another round or two that you can get. And I think he probably could put up the same exact production as Saquon Barkley in fantasy or better. So I'm not touching Barkley this year.
I'm stunned that you have Barkley ahead of Chubb. If you flipped them, that would have made sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's because Barkley could easily get 90 targets in a season, 100 targets, while Chubb last year was at his career high at 37, and that's when they had Amari Cooper and nobody else to pass to. And
Right.
now you add in a bunch of other weapons. I only expect that to go down.
All right. We are at number 6, almost halfway through.
Okay. I'm cheating here. I have two guys tied at 5-6, and
No.
I cannot choose. I went back and forth. They're too close. I cannot choose, and I will not choose. But I think I
No.
did choose because I did put one higher than like when I listed them. But anyways, all right, let's start with 6 then. But I just want everyone to know these two are like identical.
They're close.
Jonathan Taylor from the Colts, I have at 6. Now, I will say, as we were just talking, a lot of Nick Chubb's issues was, he doesn't get enough targets, and that was my issue with him. These two guys don't get a ton of targets either, but there's a reason I have them ahead. So Jonathan Taylor was RB1. We've already seen the ceiling out of Jonathan Taylor, and that's being the running back 1 in a season. That was just 2 years ago in 2021. He had the high ankle sprain last year in week 4, and that pretty much just wasted his whole season because by the time he was back, like he missed only 2 games. He came back before he was fully healthy. He was pretty bad for a bit. And then by the time he was healthy again, that offense was just a shit show. Like it was so bad. And it just, and then he missed the last 3 games again. So it was pretty much a throwaway season for me with Jonathan Taylor. That whole team was just so bad. I still expect them to be relatively bad this year again. I do like that they hired Shane Steichen. I think he's going to come in and be a really good head coach for them. I love that they drafted Anthony Richardson for him. I think they're a good match since we've already seen. How do you say it? Shane Steichen?
Steichen. I say Steichen.
Thank you. Steichen, helped Jalen Hurts in his development. So, and they're kind of similar quarterbacks in that way, where I think the Colts will rely on Richardson's legs for most of his rookie season, have him pass just when they need to. I just fully expect this to be a rushing offense, even if they're like just heavy on the run, and a mobile quarterback like Anthony Richardson, who's just this incredibly mobile, is going to open up the running lanes for Jonathan Taylor so much, who's already super efficient, who already has that breakaway speed. He can take it. If you give him a hole, he's gone. I mean, he is literally gone. And if a defense doesn't know whether it's staying with Anthony Richardson or staying with Jonathan Taylor, that's going to give him so much space to work. And hopefully he can stay healthy this whole season. And I don't know how many scoring opportunities he will have, but again, he can score from anywhere on the field. So he's just too talented to say he can be any further than this. And the quarterback situation and the new head coach does get me excited for how much they're going to run this year.
I like everything you said. It's just the variance with Richardson does scare me a little because I agree. He could be great. He has the physical ability to be fantastic. And Steichen clearly knows how to use a mobile quarterback and craft a system around a mobile quarterback. We saw that with the Eagles and Jalen Hurts. If Richardson is a disaster, though, that could be trouble and he may be a disaster, just like regular first year rookie quarterback, inexperienced guy disaster. But that's obviously going to be tough for Jonathan Taylor. I worry about the workload with Taylor. He's had a lot of touches. He was hurt last year. We'll see. I actually think 6 is like a perfect spot for him because you're right. His highs could be awesome. There is a path to him having a really, really successful year, but there's some variance there that does scare me a little.
I will say if Anthony Richardson isn't good, I still think that just means they're relying on Jonathan Taylor even more. But then their backup's Gardner Minshew. And we saw James Robinson put up a top 5 running back season for fantasy with Gardner Minshew, with the Jaguars' terrible offense. So there's still hope that even if they have to go on to a different quarterback, Taylor will be fine.
I love me some Gardner Minshew. He's the guy I want to
If you cut his hair, nobody would think he's good. That's just the truth.
No, that's not true at all. He's infinitely better than Sam Darnold.
He's really, really good at marketing.
He's the guy I wanted the Niners to get rather than Sam Darnold was Gardner Minshew.
Everybody's better than Sam Darnold.
Right.
That's not saying anything. Everyone's better than Sam Darnold.
I don't know why you hate Gardner Minshew so much.
I don't hate Gardner Minshew. I just think he's a fantastic marketer. He's really good at making his brand good. I think he's just like many other backup quarterbacks, but because he's fun and exciting and has the long hair and the cool photos and the mustache, people like him better. It's kind of like
44 touchdowns and 15 interceptions in his career. That's pretty damn good. How many backup quarterbacks can say that?
I don't know. I would have to look it up.
JJ00 says, what are the odds Jonathan Taylor gets traded? He and other running backs are complaining vocally about the franchise tag. J.K. Dobbins is also complaining about his contract, which is bold from a guy who has missed more games than he's played. I guess it's possible, but I don't see the Colts trading Jonathan Taylor.
I see it virtually zero before this season, at least. Maybe after next season, but I don't see a world where they would go trade Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, unless they got like some crazy offer, which I don't see coming. Maybe if they got the McCaffrey offer, right? The Niners gave up a second, a third, a fourth, and then a fifth the following season for Christian McCaffrey. Maybe the Colts do that, but I think they kind of want to build this thing up with Richardson and Taylor.
Yeah, if you send away Taylor, you're just, I don't know. What was, I don't know. Yeah, he's still so young. He's on a rookie contract still. You took him in the second, like, just use him until his rookie contract's done, right?
I completely agree. Yeah. All right, this is the guy you tried to shoehorn into number 6, but we're putting him at number 5.
Derrick Henry. This is the thing with Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor. They're very similar in a way. They're both on really bad offenses that we think will be pretty bad this year. Both with a confusing quarterback situation. We don't know who will, like Ryan Tannehill, if he's back healthy and good, maybe he lasts the whole year. If they start losing, I'm sure they're going to want to see Will Levis. So we don't know the running back situation. Yep. They both don't get a ton of targets, but they're both super good on the ground. The thing is, Derrick Henry's old and Jonathan Taylor is young. And this is the issue in deciding between the two. But Derrick Henry has been nothing but fantastic when he's on the field, running back 4 in total points and points per game in 2022, even with the Titans being complete disasters. So we saw Jonathan Taylor struggle last year with the Colts being disasters. Now, was that partly due to injury? Probably, but he was even struggling the couple games before getting injured. So we've seen Henry be great on a really bad team. He was a running back 1 in fantasy points per game in 2021 before fracturing his foot. Again, I am a little bit worried about the quarterback situation, but either way, I think this team is going to just lean on Derrick Henry like they always do. Like, this is Derrick Henry's team. And he did have a career high 41 targets, 398 receiving yards last year. That's not great for fantasy when it comes to running backs, but it's not absolutely terrible either. And they didn't bring in anybody. They have no wide receivers besides second-year wide receiver Treylon Burks, who is still a complete unknown. So they're going to still need to use Derrick Henry in the passing game. He scored double-digit touchdowns in each of the last 5 seasons, which is insane to think when in 2021 he missed nearly half the year and he still scored 10 touchdowns. He will be 29 years old. So who knows when the wheels could fall off? It could be this year, right? But I still think he has one more great fantasy season in him. So that's why I still have him as the top 5 guy. He's just so reliable. Like he's just going to get the job done.
And they are using him more in the passing game, like you talked about. He averaged 12 yards a catch last year. Like,
because they get him when he does get a catch. It's one of those screenplays. He has so much space. And if you give Derrick Henry space, like, it's so hard to tackle that man. So they do it in the right way. They use him in the right way for the receiving work. And he can bring any screen pass to the house. It doesn't matter how far away it is.
Would you say this? Obviously, health is the overriding factor for every running back. But assuming every running back in the league stays healthy, Derrick Henry has the lowest floor of any of them. Would you agree?
The highest floor?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yes. So that's what I mean. The highest floor.
Yeah. Christian McCaffrey, I'd say, has the highest. Because if he stays healthy, he's going to get so many receptions as well. And he's on a much better offense. So you would expect there to be more scoring opportunities. But yeah, if Derrick Henry stays healthy all season long, he's going to be a top 3 running back.
To me, if you told me that I can get every running back healthy for every game, I would take Henry. Just
in fantasy?
Christian McCaffrey has some like really low rushing yardage total games. Yeah, he has good receiving yardage.
I mean, so does Derrick Henry.
I don't know. I mean, what's Derrick Henry's low game last year? He had one game with 25 yards. That wasn't great. That was against Buffalo, where they got blown out 41-7, though.
But that's the thing, is they could get blown out a ton next year.
Well, yeah, that is true. All right. You poo-pooed my Derrick Henry take. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Number 4.
Number 4 is Austin Ekeler from the Chargers. I've had him higher each of the last 2 years. and he's been fantastic. And if you want to draft him higher, that's fine. But I do think he's going to lose some of his receiving volume this year, and this touchdown luck has to change somehow. He was a running back 1 last year, running back 2 in 2021. But nothing but absolutely incredible, especially in any PPR format, half PPR, so on. But even in standard, because he scored 38 scrimmage touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. 18 last year, 20 and 21, and that just feels impossible for him to repeat this touchdown luck for a third straight year. Only 2 running backs have scored 16 plus touchdowns in 3 straight seasons. That was Sean Alexander and LaDainian Tomlinson. Ooh. Tomlinson's the only one to score 18 plus in 3 straight seasons. It just feels like they have to come down, just if you're looking at probability here. And as I mentioned on last week's show, if you didn't listen, go listen to the quarterback rankings. I expect Justin Herbert to throw way more touchdowns this year, because the luck has been all on Austin Ekeler's side and none on Justin Herbert's side, especially last year, only 25 passing touchdowns. Like, I don't see that even coming close to repeating this year, especially with the change of the offensive coordinator to Kellen Moore. And where I also think he's going to see a drastic change is Ekeler had 127 targets last year. That was up from 94 in 2021, which was also extremely high. But his yards per reception suffered so bad. He only averaged 6.7 yards per reception, which throughout his career, he was averaging over 9 yards per reception, which is fantastic for a running back. 6.7 is really, really bad. And that's just not who Austin Ekeler is, but it's because the air yards per target were so low. And like, teams knew it was just dump off. 1 gazillion times to Austin Ekeler. Like, this offense wasn't looking down the field at all. They had a lot of injuries, so they were missing Keenan Allen and Mike Williams for a lot of the season. They're bringing in Quentin Johnston. They have Johnston. They have so many weapons now that I think they're going to look down the field more. Herbert's air yards per target were abysmal last year, so I do expect those targets to go down. And he's never had more than 206 carries in a season in his career, so it's not like he gets a ton of work on the ground. I still think he's going to be very good. I still think he's going to get his targets. Like, he'll still get 75 plus targets. He's still going to score probably double-digit touchdowns. I just don't think it's going to be as incredible as it was the last 2 seasons.
The Chargers offense, it was brutal to watch at times. You're right. The air yards were so low. Now they're bringing in Kellen Moore. He knows how to run an offense. He's had one of the highest scoring offenses, not in Kansas City, in the entire league. And I think that's going to benefit Herbert. I think you're right. Herbert's going to throw way more touchdowns, which probably takes some away from Austin Ekeler. He's never had 1,000 yards rushing in a season. I know that doesn't matter because he's catching passes. I don't think he's basically a wide receiver out there. Like, yeah. You pretty much assume wide receiver production out of him, which is insane. 127 targets last year. That's absurd.
And there's still no other running backs on this team, really. It is wild that he's ever had more than 206 carries, because there's not a lot of other guys back there, but they have to give other guys carries who don't do anything, because you're going to get Austin Ekeler's not a big dude, and you can't give him a ton of carries or he's going to get hurt, and he's too important to that team as a weapon elsewhere that you can't be giving him all those carries. And this is why also his rushing touchdowns that he's been scoring 12 and 13 over the last 2 years. It's like, that's an insane rate of rushing touchdowns when you haven't even had over 206 carries in a season.
He makes them count, right? What can you say? But I agree. I think it's very possible that the Chargers could be a much better offense this year, and his numbers could be worse. And that would obviously scare me. I would not draft him crazy early, but that's just me. I generally
lose. And he's going to go really early because he's been so good, and he should go early, but I will not be taking him because I don't think he's worth that cost this year.
There are 3 running backs left in Michelle's top 10 in fantasy. These are the top 3 cream of the crop. Who gets the bronze medal this year?
It's Tony Pollard, my favorite running back coming into this season for his value and everything he has to offer. Listen, he was already the running back 7 in points per game last season. Had 1,378 scrimmage yards, and that was with Ezekiel Elliott taking away 248 touches. He had 248 running back touches last year, Ezekiel Elliott. And still, Tony Pollard was able to make himself the running back 7 in points per game and put up over 1,300 scrimmage yards. if you're just adding 100 more touches to Pollard, which I think is fair out of the 248 that Zeke's leaving behind, they have no one else on the team. Who are you going to give? Ronald Jones, Deuce Vaughn, who's like 98 pounds. Like, I just don't expect, there to be many touches to other guys in this backfield. So even if you just give 100 more touches to Pollard from his last year work, that would have put him at 1,948 scrimmage yards last year. And he had a bunch of touchdowns last season as well. I think he had 12 scrimmage touchdowns. So he's also able to score, and they're going to need to utilize him in that area because, again, they don't have anybody else. But there was 30 running backs last year that had 200 plus touches. Pollard ranked second among those running backs in fantasy points scored per touch, behind only Austin Ekeler. He actually scored more than Christian McCaffrey on a fantasy points per touch rate. And I don't think this is going to change with him now becoming I don't think it's that he can't handle having the workload. I think they were paying Zeke so much money that they had no choice. And he was already like the vet. He was a leader on a team. Like,
Jerry Jones loves him.
Yeah. You can't just sit a guy like that on the sidelines. He's going to create a problem. Like, it would just be awkward. You're going to put him in the game, but Tony Pollard has had 18 career games with 14 plus touches. Over those 18 games, he's accumulated over 1,900 scrimmage yards, over 108 scrimmage yards per game, and 15 scrimmage touchdowns. He's had 6 career games with 18 plus scrimmage touchdowns, average over 120 yards per game, and had 5 touchdowns. So it hasn't hurt him in those games that he's gotten more touches. It's not like his efficiency's gone down. It's just gone up. And I know people are worried about the new OC, Brian Schottenheimer, and will Mike McCarthy call plays. But I will say, Schottenheimer was the Seahawks OC from 2018 to 2020. Chris Carson had the 5th most rushing yards and the 6th most scrimmage touches in the NFL during that span. Only Zeke, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, CMC, and Kamara had more touches than Chris Carson during that span. And I think Tony Pollard's more talented than Chris Carson.
2 questions. One, he is coming off an injury, and it's coming off an injury in a playoff game. So the latest possible point in the season for the Cowboys, he had the injury. Does that scare you at all? And 2, there is talk that they may bring Zeke Elliott back, touchdown vulture Zeke Elliott, which is what he would essentially be in that offense, because everybody knows now, it is clear he's a better player than Zeke Elliott. But if they bring Zeke back, is Pollard still your RB3?
No, he won't be if Zeke comes back. That will just destroy
Where
my
would
heart.
how far down does he drop?
I'll put Austin Ekeler over him. He'll be like probably after Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor, but I would still put him ahead of Saquon Barkley. So around RB7.
7. Ooh, wow. Yeah, because that's what Zeke's going to be, short yardage guy. He was actually good, Zeke was, in that role for the Cowboys last year. I love Tony Pollard. I
still would have a lot of Tony Pollard because with Zeke coming back, his cost would even go down further. So he still would be a good value. But yeah, that would just suck. And also that would suck for the Cowboys. Like, let good players touch the ball. Zeke is done. He's done.
I'm super skeptical of the Cowboys.
But I'm not scared of his injury, by the way. It was a fracture. I'm not scared of fractures as much as I am of like knee ligament injuries or something like that. Injuries. Yeah. So it's just a fracture. It's fixed. You're good. And he says he'll be ready by training camp. So
I'm super skeptical of the Cowboys' plan. They literally have said, we don't want to be the number 1 offense. We'd like to be worse. We want our offense to be worse. They had Kellen Moore there. Like I said, only the Chiefs have scored more points as an offense in Kellen Moore's tenure with the Cowboys. That's pretty damn impressive. And the Cowboys are saying, no, we think the way to go is to get worse, to score fewer points. I'm super skeptical of the Cowboys. They hired an offensive coach and then immediately said, don't worry, we're not going to run his system. We're going to run Kellen Moore's system. Now they're saying we're getting rid of Kellen Moore, even though he was successful, and they're going to be running Mike freaking McCarthy's system. No, thank you.
I don't think it's going to be as bad as you think. I have more optimism than you have, but we've been disagreeing about this all offseason long.
You would have to have more optimism than me, just by default. I'll just say that. Okay, so we have 2 left. I think I know I know who your number 2 is, and this is what's going to piss 49er fans off.
It's Christian McCaffrey.
Number
you all know
2.
what team he's on. I don't have to say it. This is it for him. When he's healthy and on the field, he's absolutely amazing. He was the RB2 in fantasy points per game last year, RB1 after he joined the 49ers from weeks 10 through 18. He was a running back 1 in fantasy points per game. He was RB1 in fantasy points per game by a ton in 2019, like a ton. And then in 2020, he was RB1 in points per game by a ton, but he only played 3 games. And that's the issue then, right? Because then he missed almost all of 2020. He was injured for most of 2021. He did come back, have a great season in 2022 and stayed healthy. That's my biggest scare with Christian McCaffrey is the 49ers have a pretty hard time keeping running backs healthy in their backfield. Keeping anybody healthy in that backfield. They have a very hard time doing it. They travel around the freaking world, it feels like this year. Like they're nonstop traveling. How will his body hold up? And that is the biggest determining factor when it comes from Christian McCaffrey to the RB1. And that's why I have him at 2. If he stays healthy, he's going to be the focal point of this offense. He's going to be great. I will say also, we don't know, after a full season, when Debo missed a bunch of those games that Christian McCaffrey played once, like the second half of the season, we don't know if this is going to happen to CMC as well, where it's like, oh, today's not a CMC game, it's a Debo game. Or today's a Kittle game. Today's an Ayuk game. I don't think it's going to happen to CMC as much as it does those other guys, but it could sometimes because they have so many weapons. They don't need CMC to be the focal point. They can use one of these other guys in any given game. So that's also where I kind of say maybe not RB1, but he's RB2. I still think he's absolutely amazing. He's going to be great.
Just say it, Michelle. You hate Christian McCaffrey. We can all tell.
You got me.
Yeah, just admit it. I actually think he's the one guy that's sort of immune to that Shanahan, like, who's he going to feature this week? I think the offense has to orbit around him. He generates the confusion from defenses because where he is, where he starts the play, and where he ends the play by the time they snap the ball are 2 different things. He's constantly changing the assignments on defense. He's messing with everything. The offense only scored 19 points a game when he wasn't there. So they do need him to be the focal point. I think is the only thing that would scare me is health with him. That's it. And that's a question for pretty much every running back. Other than that, to me, he's RB1. He's going to catch passes. 108 targets for Christian McCaffrey last year. 85 catches. Just ridiculous. He also threw a touchdown pass, lest we forget. I just think he's in the perfect place with the perfect coach. He's got a quarterback that's not afraid to dump it off to him. To me, he would be RB1. But you just want to rankle 49er fans. You're not a 49er fan. We all know. I see what you're doing here.
So let's say we had a group of guys, right? I give you a group of guys, and I say Christian McCaffrey, Tony Pollard, Austin Ekeler, Derrick Henry, right? Those are the 4 guys. And I don't want to say my top guy yet. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows. But and this other guy. But you had to say, I get to put down $100, but I have to pick which one of these guys is going to miss 5 games this season. Which one would you put the money down on?
I don't know. See, McCaffrey was banged up last year with the Niners, but he played through it. Down the stretch last year, he
was still banged up. Like, that's the thing. It's like, I feel like he felt like he had to because they just traded all those picks for him. Like, that would have been real. Like, if you could play, you could play. You just traded all those picks for you. You better. Like, we need you. So, but it still was concerning. He was banged up again.
But then he looked actually fresher in the Eagles game, which people kind of forget about because they got trounced. But, like, he had that awesome touchdown run that tied the score at 7. Like, he actually looked better in the most crucial area. I think he is going to stay healthy next year. I'm going to roll that dice. And God help.
Who would you put the $100 on that missed 5 games out of this group?
It was, give me the group again. McCaffrey, Henry,
Ekeler, and Pollard.
Oh, and Pollard. I'll go Ekeler. He's small. He is frequently banged up. I feel like he's always got a hamstring problem. I'll go with Ekeler, although I see your point. McCaffrey is not the worst bet to make out of that group.
Yeah. And but the thing is, I also have CMC ahead of all those guys. So I'll say my running back one now. It's Bijan Robinson. Yes, rookie fever, shiny new toy, running back for the Falcons, baby. But right now, so you know Bijan Robinson, what he looks like, right? Beastly of a man, true workhorse body. If you had $100 to put down who misses 5 games next year, who would it be? Christian McCaffrey or Bijan Robinson? Just those two straight up.
I don't know. I don't know anything about Bijan Robinson.
See, now, okay, whatever. I obviously any running back can get hurt, but I just feel like the probability is more on Christian McCaffrey. But the thing about Bijan Robinson, he's built. He's built like a workhorse, and he could do it all. Last year at Texas, he averaged 6.1 yards per carry, 16.5 yards per reception. Insane. 20 scrimmage touchdowns, and it was all in 12 games. So he's pretty freaking amazing. I mean, it was amazing his entire Texas career. I know you don't care about what players do in college, but it turns out running backs who are really good in college typically end up being pretty good in the NFL. It translates pretty well as long as they stay healthy. And they played in I'm not talking like if you played in some terrible school, but if you play in a good conference, it normally equals out. But he's going to a team who, for whatever reason, drafted him as the 8th overall pick or 9th, whatever 8th overall pick. When they have so many holes. I mean, it's not like they're a good team where they're just like, we're one running back away from making the Super Bowl. Like that, there was no reason for them to take him, but they did. And they're a team that loves to run. They had 559 rushing attempts last year. Even if because people are like, well, they have to throw more next year. Maybe, but even if that decreases by 60 rushing attempts, and they have 500 rushing attempts, which I think is very fair. 10 teams had over 500 carries last year. So I think they're still going to be top 10 in carries. That still gives Bijan Robinson at least 250, 300 plus carries as a rookie. And I think he gets at least 60 targets next year because he is a really, really good receiving back. The Falcons running, like the offense wasn't good last year. So you might say, how many scoring opportunities will he have? But even with them being bad last year, and I think they could be better this year, the Falcons running backs combined for 89 carries inside the red zone, which was the most in the NFL last season. So he should still have plenty of opportunities to score. And yes, Tyler Algier last year as a rookie was really good. And that's saying something. Like he averaged 5.5 yards per carry, had over 107 rushing yards per game, and scored over 17 fantasy points per game in the 4 games that Desmond Ritter started last year. So like you already see a running back be really good in games with Desmond Ritter. And Tyler Algier did look good. And I'm sure he's still going to get his carries. But you don't take a running back at 8th overall and say, we're worried about Tyler Algier and his touches. Like, he's a second-year guy. He was a 5th-round pick last year. He will still get work. I'm not saying that, but he's not good as a receiver. That's not a thing he was known for in school, and they didn't use him as that last year. That's where Bijan Robinson shines as well. So even if Tyler Algier is on the field, there's no saying that Bijan Robinson won't be lined up in the slot, because what wide receivers do they have there? Drake London? And who else? So I'm sure Bijan Robinson will be on the field even when other running backs are on the field. And those are prime fantasy scoring opportunities when he's lined up in the slot. So I expect him to just be absolutely amazing right out of the gate. He's truly one of the best prospects to come out of college in a really, really, really long time.
The Falcons were 3rd in rushing last year. They ran the ball on 55% of their plays. That was the most in the entire league. Arthur Smith knows how to run the ball. So it's a very good fit. The quarterback situation does scare me a little. I have no idea what Desmond Ritter is going to be, but I think he's in a good spot. I just don't know if he'd be my number 1. Like if I could get Bijan as my RB2, I would be like incredible.
You're never gonna get him as a number 2. He's going as like the RB 3-4 now. He's getting up there in draft cost.
The only thing I can look, I like proven production. Christian McCaffrey, the only question with him is health. If he's out there, he's going to kill it for you. I don't know that about Bijan Robinson because he is a rookie. That's the only thing that scares me, was we just don't know. I know he was good in college. I get it. He should be good. Everything points to him being super successful, but unknowns are unknowns, and I hate uncertainty. In life and in fantasy, I hate uncertainty.
That's fine. I'm okay taking the uncertain player. I'm okay taking that rookie. A lot of rookie running backs end up being very good. And we saw Saquon. It's not like we have never seen a rookie running back be number one before. We saw Saquon Barkley in 2018 destroy the league, and we thought he was going to like keep doing that, and obviously he hasn't. But I see Bijan Robinson having a Saquon Barkley-esque type season.
JJ00 on Twitch says, how can they run that much? Kate, your wife, says Desmond Ritter is the truth.
I think she's coming off that take a little bit. I mean, Ritter looked not fantastic last year. He did get better every game, so there's a little bit of hope, but I don't think she's riding the Desmond Ritter's great so hard this offseason.
Chris Sims was a huge Desmond Ritter fan when he came out. I think he had him as one of his top 3 quarterbacks in the entire class. So Kate is not alone on that. By the way, if you want more fantasy advice, check out the Ball Blast Football Podcast with Michelle and her wife, Kate. They will make you a better, smarter football fan, and you'll get to hear Desmond Ritter takes from Kate, which, you know what? Stick to it. Albert says, how do you put a running back number 1 and he's never played a game yet in the NFL?
Because I just said that we've seen running backs be number 1 with never playing a game in the NFL before.
I told you were going to make Niner fans mad. You didn't believe me.
I will say, so someone brought up, where's Josh Jacobs? He is right outside. So there's 4 guys that are sitting right outside the top 4. Wish I could have found a spot for them. It's Josh Jacobs. It's Breece Hall, and Breece Hall would have been in here if we knew more about his injury. Like, everything looks like it's going to be okay, but it was a pretty severe injury last year. If we get closer to the season and he looks like he's going to be good to go week 1 and get his touches, like, he'll be top 10. He would be over Najee. He'd be over Alexander Madison and maybe even over Like, Breece Hall was amazing last year, and now he gets Aaron Rodgers. I'm just worried about the injury with him. Then Travis Etienne, love him. And Jahmyr Gibbs, if this is full PPR, I may have found a spot for him. But I also think Jahmyr Gibbs as a rookie will have a really nice season. But it's also really hard to trust Lions running backs. So who knows?
What about Dalvin Cook? Because to me, if
we need a team for him.
If he lands in Miami with Mike McDaniel there and the weapons they already have in the passing game, to me, that is a monster potentially. I know Mike McDaniel knows how to map out the run game because we saw him do it in San Francisco for years. I know, obviously he's not signed yet, but do you take a flyer on Dalvin Cook and just, maybe banking on that he'll end up in Miami? And if so, like, what round would you be willing to do that?
Well, hopefully we'll know what team he's on, right? Like, if he's not on a team by the time we're drafting, then no one's like, I don't know what's going on with him. But if you're in best ball leagues right now drafting, yeah, I'd take a flyer on Dalvin Cook. But you need him to go to Miami, I feel like right now, or maybe the Broncos if Javonte Williams isn't ready, but it's really Miami. And I don't know what's taking so long to get this deal done. You would just think this would already be done. And
they reportedly have an offer out to him. And he may just be, trying to wait it out and see if he gets any others and then maybe, institute some type of bidding war.
He's had links to the Patriots. That would be not great.
Well, they have Ramondre Stevenson in
there. Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Exactly. So that would not be great for fantasy if he goes to the Patriots. But they might want 2 guys. Bill Belichick loves to do this kind of crap. Ruin our hopes. So I can't rank Dalvin Cook until we know where he's at. And even if he does land with Miami, it would be really hard to decide between Alexander Madison with the Vikings or Dalvin Cook with Miami.
But Miami does have Raheem Mostert. They do have Jeff Wilson Jr. Maybe Mike McDaniel would rotate those guys so much that would lessen Cook's impact. Whereas you mentioned Alexander Madison, like, he's the guy. And that's a huge, huge factor when it comes to running back production. I'm stunned you didn't have Josh Jacobs anywhere in the top 10. That, to me,
it's hard to get him. I don't know. He had such a great season last year. He really, really did. But you don't know what this offense is going to look like. Jimmy Garoppolo is even going to I guess they say he's going to be ready to go. But if it's Aiden O'Connell, oh my Lord, like, what is this offense going to look like? He had a career high 64 targets. Like, that's not really his game. And they now, like, that's with everybody injured last year. It was Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfrow dealt with injuries. Darren Waller dealt with injuries. Now they brought in Jacoby Myers. Hunter Renfrow should be back healthy. They did lose Darren Waller, but they brought in Austin Hooper. They drafted Michael Myers in the 2nd round, who is one of the most respected tight ends coming out in this draft class. Like, they have a lot of weapons. Mayer.
You said Michael Myers. That's the guy from
Did
Hollywood.
Yeah, that's funny. But so I don't expect him to get used a ton as a receiver. Yeah, maybe they give him 340 rushes again. But we did see that usage start to die down at the end of last year. 15 carries for 44 yards, 17 carries, 69 yards, 17 carries, 45 yards. like he had 6 amazing games. Like I'm not going to take that away from him.
6. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. But then he had a lot of this is how many games: 57, 69, 66, 43, 67, 78, 44, 69, 45. That's also a lot of games I just named. That's not very good.
He had every rushing touchdown for the Raiders last year. No running back on the Raiders even had 20 carries other than him. That's how much of the workload he got. That is such an insane.
He'll probably be top 10. It's just, I don't know. I can't trust him. Also, he's never scored a receiving touchdown in his career.
Really?
Yeah.
That's really weird. But I don't know. To me, I would have him somewhere in the top, even if you put him at 10 because the uncertainty.
Who are you putting him over? You want to maybe over Najee? Yeah.
The only thing Najee does to me is play. He's just not. He reminds me of Trent Richardson, who averaged 3 yards a carry for the Browns, but he had so many carries that he was.
That was Josh Jacobs though. Prior to, in 2020, Jacobs averaged 3.9 yards per carry. 2021, 4.0. It's not like Jacobs was ever efficient until last year, all of a sudden, and he became hyper efficient in these games. But that again ended up dying towards the end of the year. He started averaging 2 yards per carry all of a sudden over the last 4 games. I don't know what happened, but they're off. I don't know. I don't think they've made enough changes for the offense to be great. And the quarterback scares me. He scares me. I think he just had an exceptional handful of games that brought up his total.
It's possible. And running back performance is so volatile. I don't even think we've had Derrick Henry was the first guy to lead the league in rushing in back-to-back seasons in a long, long time. So you do have to plan for some changes at that spot. So let's recap the top 10 quickly. Number 10, Najee Harris. Number 9, Alexander Madison. Number 8, Nick Chubb. Number 7, Saquon Barkley. 6, Jonathan Taylor. 5, Derrick Henry. 4, Austin Ekeler. 3, Tony Pollard. 2, Christian McCaffrey. And number 1, your favorite running back ever in the history of the world, rookie running back Bijan Robinson.
I know. He better do good. Because now I'm putting my whole reputation on Bijan.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Risky
indeed.
You can't play it safe. That's boring. This is fantasy. You want to win it all. Sometimes you got to be risky.
Michelle, never. That's the one thing I respect about you. You never play it safe when it comes to fantasy. You take big swings, and sometimes you strike out, but sometimes you hit a home run.
Yeah. That's, Austin Ekeler was my RB3 heading into 2021, and everyone thought that was crazy. And guess what? He was the RB2 that year. So, and then obviously last year, everyone expected him to be great, and he was. But there's times where I get crazy and it works out. There's also times where I fall in love with a guy named Zach Moss and he does absolutely nothing in his life. So, give and take.
Hey, nobody bats 1,000, right? So that's the top 10 rankings. We are going to continue with our rankings. I love breaking down all the positions. Next week is wide receivers, I believe, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Those are the hardest.
Yeah, they are the hardest, but I think it's the most fun discussion also. So we'll have wide receivers, we'll do tight ends, and then guess what? It's going to be training camp, baby. The rookies report to training camp. I think it's let me check the calendar really quick. It's the 18th, I want to say. And then the week later, the 25th, the vets report for training camp. So we will be through the desert of football news. And it's perfect. Everything's going to line up.
And then we could just cry about Sam Darnold versus Trey Lance for the month of August.
Hey, we did a whole episode and we didn't mention them till 58 minutes. So give us some credit. I know there's some people that are, tired of the quarterback talk. Well, guess what? We gave you all running backs today. You're welcome. Please like and subscribe to the Gold Standard YouTube page. Again, we are so close to 4,000 subscribers. I would love to get over that mark before the start of training camp. Please, please, please like and subscribe. Hit the bell so you get notified whenever we go live, which is pretty much every single day during every single weekday, I should say. So please, please do that. And rate, review, follow the Gold Standard podcast wherever you get your audio podcast, and follow the Ball Blast Football podcast all year for all your fantasy advice as well. I know we're giving you a lot of homework, but I promise you it's worth it.
Oh, yeah. And I'm going to make Levin start saying Bosa instead of Boza. And you better fix that 4-star review to 5-star.
I'll work on it. I never noticed it, but now I'll never be able to unhear it. Like it's going to stick out at me.
I hear it. I know what he's saying, but I wouldn't let that make me give a whole less star. There's only 5 stars, guys. You're making the tiniest thing take away 1/5 of our ratings.
You know who else?
It's like taking a test and, messing up on one question, getting an 80%. That's crazy. 100, taking a 100 question test, getting one wrong and getting 80%. That's crazy. We
want the 5 stars. Give us the 5-star. And Brian Baldinger does the same thing. Boza. He always says Boza. Shark Week. Boza.
So does one of the announcers on TV, and it drives me crazy. It might be Collinsworth. Is that
Chris Collinsworth?
Yeah, I was like, there's no way he's Colin Collinsworth. That would be a great name.
You Chris Collinsworth and Colin Cowherd into one terrifying human.
Yeah.
Anybody wants to do a Photoshop on that, by the way, I support it. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody. We'll be back with wide receivers next week.
Bye, y'all.